Hey, Queens and Kings. As you all know, my name is Bazal Morani. I'm the CEO of Empire Central Financial. I'm so glad we're all here today, and we're going to talk about how important it is for estate planning. So today we're going to talk about estate planning. And why talk about estate planning and why now? Right? The reason why we talk about estate planning now is because while it has been around for so long, we take the laws for granted, but it's so very, very important. Now, you know, the reason why those estate planning laws and, structures are so important is because it protects your property from others, like your neighbors or the government, from taking it from you. When you die, the ownership will be transferred based on succession laws. Now, with some states, it's quite straightforward. It's either going to be your spouse or it will be your spouse and child. Um, and that person will end up with full ownership rights. Now, the laws of succession governing the transfer of property at death are very clear and very specific, right? Even though we may not always know what they are. Now, for example, in some states, like I mentioned, one spouse dies, the other one automatically gets everything. In another state, it would be the spouse or child. Now, in other states, it may not be the case, right? So estate planning really starts with knowing what the laws in your state are. Now, you can decide if you want to go with that law or you want to take the law into your own hands, so to speak, by drafting a will and trust to name the people you specifically want to receive your properties after you die. Now, estate planning involves so much more, right? It's not just wills and trusts. It includes so much more detail, more thought. You hold the title of your properties in the first place can have, repercussions both while you're alive and after you die. Then what about your IRA? Your IRA beneficiaries are signed without giving much thought to it, but those forms are really powerful estate planning tools, and they need to be coordinated with the rest of your estate plan. Now, the point is that the law governing property ownership and property transfer are very complicated, and you need to know how they work so you can figure out how they affect you and your family after you die. Now, if you want to override those laws in some way, which most people do, in order to make things easier on your family, you need to get the proper legal documents, which is what we're going to be talking about. We call this getting your affairs in order, right? We've all heard that before. Everyone needs to do this. But before I tell you why everyone needs to do this, let me just give you a very quick disclaimer. Okay? Anything we cover today in the presentation is not legal advice. It is just explaining why estate planning is important and why you should do it. But we are not giving legal advice. If you think that this is important for you and you have some questions, please speak with an estate planning attorney for more details. Now, as we all know, life is unpredictable. We see it in the news all the time. Accidents, deaths, sicknesses. I mean, if coronavirus taught us anything, is that anything can happen, right? Now, because life is so unpredictable, you have to be prepared, right? There's natural disasters. There's so much that goes on, and you never know. So, let's make sure we're prepared. Now, they say death is unpredictable, but death is actually extremely predictable, right? We are all going to die. What is unpredictable is when we are going to die. We could die 30 years from now, we could die 20 years from now, we could die tomorrow. Nobody knows. And that is why it's important to get our first in order now, because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. Now, because the laws are ownership are intangible, it's easy to ignore them, right? Like, it's not really something you see every day. It's not something you're always around. But the thing is, death is actually a legal event. once a person dies, the laws come into effect. And they determine what will happen to your assets and your possessions. That is who the new legal owners will be, the people that are given the laws decide, right? So if you have done your estate planning, you can live the rest of your life knowing that when your time comes, you have taken care of it. And the laws are on your side because you set it up that way, right? Now, we're talking about the importance of estate plan, and you can't talk about the importance of something without talking about what happens if it's not there. So, what does it look like if you don't have an estate plan? Right? So, let's talk about this. You get into an accident or you have a stroke and you're incapacitated and you're unable able to talk to the doctors about your medical decisions. Wouldn't it be nice to have someone that you trust, that you know will make the right decisions for you and cares about you to talk to the doctors and decide what is best for you? Wouldn't that be great? That is possible. You can get a power of attorney, a medical power of attorney. And the thing is that, you know, doctors are usually having a document for you. You could go into the office and fill it up right away, or we can do a package for you with everything incorporated, whichever one works for you. But this is usually your first step in estate planning, is to make sure you have a medical directive. Now, while you're worrying about and thinking about you being incapacitated, let's also talk about your financials, right? Because if you're incapacitated, you can also not make your financial decisions. You're incapacitated. So you can get a financial power of attorney that is able to run your account and make your payments. So if you have medical bills, your mortgage payments, your rent, your utilities, you're running a business, so your payrolls, whatever it is, you have someone you trust that you appoint to run those financials for you through your account, and you would be able to point that out, right? Now, loved ones won't know where to turn or what to do, right? So you have to make sure that not only are you creating the documents, but you're also making sure what will happen if you die tomorrow? Do they know who to call? Do they know who to go to? Do they know where to turn? Do they know what steps to take to make sure that the policies, the trusts, the wills, everything takes effect? Who are they going to go to? Who is your point of contact? Do they know that? Um, and you have to make sure that, you have this conversation so we can work with that. Do you have pets? Is someone going to have to take care of your pets? Are your children minors? Do you need to appoint someone who would care for your minor children? Um, and what would that payment process through the death benefit look like, through your trust? Or do you have a child or a family member that has special needs? Will they be able to care for themselves? Will they need a caretaker? Will they need a facility? Would you need to make the payments directly to the facility through the trust to ensure that they are taken care of in case of your death? Those are all questions that you need to ask, right? Now, the surviving spouse may not be able to access the funds right away. So this is for your security. The law states that once you die, your assets are all frozen. Now, depending on how your accounts are set up, so if your accounts are titled just for you, it's frozen, so your spouse can't get immediate access to your ATM or anything. But if it's a joint account and both of you are on it, they might be able to get the funds for today, but time goes on, what happens in the long run, right? And they won't be able to access the accounts until the law says they can. And usually probate processes, when there's just a will, it goes easy 2 to 3 years. So that's 2 to 3 years with no access to your assets, right? So what happens, right? And then now, when you're a married couple, your estate planning has to span the life of two lives, not just your life, but your spouse's life as well. Now, we're going to talk a little bit of Barry White because we need to know what happens when things go wrong. Now, Barry White is an interesting case. He passed away in 2003. he was separated from his ex-wife, but was not divorced, unfortunately. And he had a live-in girlfriend for 9 years, and he had 9 children. Now, the issue was that because when he died, he wasn't officially divorced, his ex-wife got all of his assets because he didn't have the trust and wills in place. And so because of that, she got everything, and his live-in girlfriend of 10 years and his 9 children got nothing, right? Now, while your case may not be that extreme, it happens, right? There are divorces, there are remarriages. We have to make sure that your estate plan is up to date. It has to make sure that it's listing the right beneficiaries, and you're making changes periodically to make sure it matches what is happening in your life at that moment. Now, let's talk taxes, right? Taxes are the biggest, I guess, fear in our forefront. Now, the thing about taxes, the exemption right now is for, estate planning is 12 million for individuals and 24 million for, couples. So people have kind of gotten used to not thinking about that. But unfortunately for us, right now, the amounts are scheduled to go back to 5 million to 5 million for individuals and 10 million for couples in 2026. So 2 years from now, which is not far. If anyone knows, you blink, the year is gone, right? Now, if you continue to procrastinate and Congress doesn't extend the law that's there right now, your estate could be subject to taxes. And it's not the only estate tax is not the only one to worry about, right? Because now some states actually have an inheritance tax that is taxed to your heir. So planning for that, and if you pass on your IRA, your beneficiaries may actually have to pay income taxes on the distributions for your IRA. So these taxes usually can't be avoided, but you can find ways that they can be reduced or deferred if they are managed right. So when you're thinking about your estate planning, plan for your estate taxes and your inheritance taxes for your children. How is that going to look? How are we going to plan that out? And how can we avoid paying as much taxes as possible, right? Because we're always worried about that. Now, the thing is, I'm going to be honest, I'll give myself as an example. When I was a kid, we didn't really talk about what happens if our parents pass away, right? It's a taboo topic in a lot of cultures, in a lot of families, in a lot of homes. So, what happens if your beneficiaries are unprepared for the new responsibilities? How are you going to make sure your IRA, money is going to them? When do they get those R&D funds? When do they, who do they call? Where do they go? Who's the trustee? How is that distribution going to work? All of those questions and what happens is important to have a discussion and plan so that your beneficiaries are prepared with their new responsibilities, right? I know before it used to be taboo for these conversations, but in this day and age, money conversations are the most important conversations you should have, right? Now, let's talk about you already have your estate plan. You are on top of your game. You got your estate plan, you got your directives, everything's good. What if it needs updating? Have you updated it recently? Have you looked at it? Have you had a new grandchild that needs to have their name added? And, when you created the will and trust, you may have put in that any future children or grandchildren that are born are automatically added. But it is better that when those children are born, that you go ahead and write their name and add them uh, into this beneficiaries list automatically. That way it is a little easier and there are less likely to be complications, right? So maybe you got a divorce and you need to remove a wife, or maybe a child got estranged or something happened and maybe that spouse isn't there anymore. Whatever it is, you got remarried, however it is, update it. Take a look. Read through it. Maybe it was 5 years ago and you're not sure. Just read through it. Is there anything missing? Anything adding that you need to add? Anything you need to remove? Update it. Or you have more assets now. Maybe when you started, you didn't have as many assets and now you have more assets. It's time to review your estate plan. Make sure you have that updated and put that in. or you have fewer assets. Maybe you sold an asset, maybe that asset's no longer there, maybe you have, downsized, whatever it is, you got to update your estate plan and make sure that's taken care of. Or your kids are older. Maybe when you created the estate plan, they were children and they were very young, and you had designated a caretaker for them once you passed. Maybe you had planned out monthly payments rather than lump sums because they couldn't handle money. Now they're older and they can handle lump sums. Maybe you want to change that, or maybe you want to keep it as a monthly payment. Whatever it is, just review, and it's always good to make sure you have things updated. Or your son or daughter got married and now you have an daughter-in-law or son-in-law, right? You may really love them and accept them and you want to make sure they're included, or you want to make sure that it is specifically for your child and that that spouse doesn't get any of the inheritance once it goes to them. And you have to make sure that your estate plan clarifies that as well. Is the new spouse involved in your estate plan or not? Okay, you have new grandchildren. Like I said, you want to add them in, put them into the document, or again, like I mentioned, getting divorced and or remarried, or if you're separated and haven't gone through the divorce process yet, or you're about to get remarried, then of course making sure that that is reflective in your estate plan, because you never know if you're getting separated, if you're separated and in the process of divorce, you want to make sure your document reflects that so you don't end up with a Barry White situation, right? And tax laws have changed, and they always do, and you never know when they go back, and or whether Congress will change something new or will they let it sunset. So knowing that and keeping up to date is difficult. So making sure you have someone that keeps track of that. We have a CPA office, making sure you're aware of the tax laws. You may not have the time to keep up with all the changes. We do, that's our job. So we can take care of that and make sure you're making your changes and managing your estate accordingly. Like I said, tax laws are always going to change. They always do. So making sure you're having someone that can keep up with that and make sure everything's good. Or you've moved to another state. Different states have different estate laws. So making sure that your state is working with your estate plan and making sure that there are no changes that need to be made according to the state you're in, or your estate plan is a national plan, is important. So make sure you check with your attorney or your estate plan manager to address that, right? Or you put in a trustee, right? This is the person who is going to make sure all the rules and laws you've set in place within your trust and will are, you know, in effect. So what if that trustee is no longer willing or able to serve? What if they passed away, or what if they moved, or what if they're too busy and they can't handle it? There's too much for them to understand. You have to keep in track of that and keep aware. And most people will also have a backup person, just in case the first person's not available or something's wrong. But keeping tabs on those two people and making sure that they're available in case you need to change it, right? Now, you could have also changed your mind about where you want your assets to go. Maybe one kid's better with real estate properties and the other one is, and you realize that now, and so you want to make sure that this kid gets real estate and the other kid gets the business instead of whatever, vice versa. Then you have to make sure you're changing that in your document as well. Preparedness is the antidote to fear. Now, this quote is quite famous, but let's keep in mind that everyone fears death, right? We're afraid to die. But if we're prepared, we face that fear and we are confident, and we're not worried about our family, our friends, our children, our grandchildren. Everything is taken care of because we are prepared. Now, you can start with your own estate planning assessment today with us. If you scan the QR code, we will get your estate plan prepared. We will set up the documents for you. We can get it notarized and ready for you to go, and we will help you throughout your process. Or if you just have a few questions and just want to kind of get an understanding of what you need and where you're at, we can do that for you too. And if you already have your estate plan in place and just want us to help you review it, we can do that complimentary as well. So if you go ahead and scan that QR code, and I look forward to see you guys soon. And thank you so, so much, you guys, for joining today. I look forward to meeting you and have a wonderful, wonderful day.